Most people thought Dean Martin was simply a smooth singer who occasionally showed up in Western movies. The guy with the glass in his hand, the relaxed smile, and the effortless charm that made audiences feel like nothing in the world could ever bother him. To millions of fans, he was the laid-back entertainer who floated through life with jokes, music, and that signature cool. But one quiet afternoon on November 22nd, 1967, something happened on a dusty backlot at Warner Brothers Studios that completely changed how people on set saw him forever. On that day, a moment unfolded that left even Clint Eastwood, Hollywood's most famous fast-draw cowboy, completely stunned. And it all happened in less than a second. The sun was beginning to sink behind the artificial buildings of a western town set. Long golden shadows stretched across wooden walkways and fake storefronts, giving the place the perfect Old West glow. Clint Eastwood had stepped outside during a break from filming Hang 'em High. Still dressed in his cowboy costume, he leaned casually against a wooden post near the saloon set, his familiar thin cigar resting between his lips. From where he stood, he could see another film crew working nearby. They were shooting scenes for Rough Night in Jericho. Normally, Clint would have paid little attention. Western sets were everywhere in Hollywood during those years. Gunfights, saloons, and quick-draw scenes were routine. But something about the scene caught his eye. Instead of the usual quiet preparation before filming, a small crowd had gathered in a circle around someone in the center. Crew members, stuntmen, and actors were watching with intense curiosity. It wasn't the typical bored waiting that filled movie sets. It looked more like people were watching something impressive. Curious, Clint stepped closer. At the center of the circle stood Dean Martin. At 50 years old, Dean was in incredible shape. His Western outfit fit him perfectly. A tailored vest, a crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled exactly once, and a gun belt resting naturally on his hips. To most people, it probably looked like just another costume piece worn by an actor. But to Clint Eastwood, something felt different immediately. He had worked with dozens of actors playing cowboys. He had watched many struggle with the weight of real revolvers or awkwardly handle holsters that didn't feel natural to them. Often, actors tried to look convincing without really understanding the tools they carried. Dean Martin was not one of those actors. The way he stood told Clint everything. Dean's stance wasn't stiff or forced. His weight rested perfectly between both feet. His right hand hovered loosely near the grip of his revolver, not gripping it, just resting naturally as if it had always belonged there. His right foot shifted slightly backward by just a few inches. A small adjustment that gave him perfect balance. Clint noticed immediately. That wasn't an actor posing. That was a gunfighter's stance. Dean was talking casually with his co-star George Peppard when Clint heard him say in that familiar relaxed tone, "You know, most fellas spend so much time trying to look fast that they forget to actually be fast." Peppard laughed. "Easy for you to say, Dean. You've been practicing this stuff for years." Dean shrugged lightly. "Something like that." Just then the assistant director called out for quiet. The scene they were preparing to shoot was simple. Dean's character would face 3 gunmen and outdraw them all. It was the kind of classic Western moment that audiences loved and actors had performed hundreds of times. But as the cameras prepared to roll, Clint found himself stepping closer. Something about Dean's posture had pulled him in. Dean casually lifted a glass from a nearby barrel and took a small sip. Everyone assumed it was whiskey. After all, Dean Martin and whiskey were practically inseparable in the public imagination. In reality, it was apple juice, a trick Dean had used for years so he could keep the illusion of drinking while staying sharp for work. He set the glass down carefully and walked to his mark. Then something changed. The relaxed smile was still there. His shoulders remained loose. But underneath that casual appearance, something sharper appeared. Something focused, controlled, almost predatory. His right hand hung near his revolver. The director called out, "Action!" The 3 stuntmen moved. Each reached for his gun with the speed of professionals who had performed dozens of quick-draw scenes. They never stood a chance. Dean Martin's hand exploded into motion. One moment it rested loosely by his side. The next moment the revolver was already out, leveled, and aimed perfectly. A metallic click echoed through the set as the hammer snapped back. The entire movement, draw, aim, and lock, took only a fraction of a second. Later, someone would time it. 0.20 seconds. Clint Eastwood didn't move. He had built his career on being the fastest gun in Western movies. He had trained for it, practiced for it, made it his signature. But what he had just seen wasn't movie speed. It was something else entirely. "Cut!" the director shouted excitedly. "Dean, that was incredible, but maybe slow it down just a little. The camera barely caught it." Dean smiled sheepishly and slipped the revolver back into the holster. "Sorry," he said casually. "Sometimes I forget we're making movies, not fighting wars." But Clint barely heard the joke. He was still replaying the draw in his mind. How had the smooth singer done that? Clint walked across the set toward him. Dean noticed him approaching and greeted him with a grin. "Well, look who wandered over," Dean said. "Clint Eastwood himself. How's the hanging business?" "Can't complain," Clint replied. Then he got straight to the point. "Mind if I ask you something?" "Shoot." Clint paused at the accidental pun. Where the hell did you learn to draw like that? Dean's smile widened. You like that? Liked it? Clint said. I've been doing this for years. That draw was 0.20 seconds. I've never seen anything like it. For a moment, Dean's playful entertainer mask faded. He glanced around the set and nodded toward a quieter corner. Come on, he said. I'll tell you. The two men stepped away from the crowd. Dean picked up his glass of apple juice and took a thoughtful sip. I started learning when I was 16, he said quietly, back in Steubenville, Ohio. My father believed every man should know how to handle a weapon. Clint listened carefully. I turned out to be pretty good at it, Dean continued. When I started doing westerns, I figured if I was going to carry a gun on screen, I'd better know what I was doing. So he trained. He practiced every day for 20 years. Clint shook his head slowly. Most actors just fake it, he said. Dean shrugged. If you're going to do something, you do it right. There was a quiet seriousness in those words. Then Dean smiled again. You want to see something fun? He repositioned himself and placed his glass of apple juice on a small table beside him. Watch the glass. Before Clint could ask why, Dean moved. The draw flashed out again, but this time something else happened. As the revolver cleared the holster, Dean's elbow brushed the glass. Not hard, just enough to slide it exactly 1 inch across the table. Not a single drop spilled. Clint stared at the glass, then back at Dean. That's impossible. Dean holstered the gun smoothly. 20 years of practice makes a lot of impossible things possible. By now, word had spread across the studio. A small crowd gathered. Actors, crew members, even executives drifted over to see what the excitement was about. Then the crowd suddenly parted. Walking through was legendary director John Ford. Ford had directed some of the greatest westerns ever made, including The Searchers and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. If anyone understood real Western authenticity, it was him. I hear someone's doing fancy shooting over here, Ford said. He looked directly at Dean. Show me. Dean obliged. This time the draw was even more impressive. The revolver cleared the holster, spun once around his finger, and snapped into perfect aim, all in one seamless motion. Again, faster than the eye could fully track. When Dean finished, silence filled the set. John Ford slowly removed his hat, then he nodded respectfully. Son, he said quietly, that's the real thing. Coming from Ford, it was the highest praise imaginable. But the moment people remembered most came next. Clint Eastwood removed the cigar from his mouth. He dropped it to the ground and crushed it beneath his boot. Then he stepped forward. 3 slow steps. He stopped in front of Dean Martin, lifted his hand to the brim of his hat, and tipped it. Not dramatically, just enough. One professional acknowledging another, one master recognizing another master. Mr. Martin, Clint said quietly, that was an education. Dean lifted his glass in a playful toast. Well, he said with a grin, here's to education, and knowing the difference between acting like something and actually being something. As the sun set over the fake Western town, the crowd slowly dispersed. But the respect forged in that moment stayed with them forever. Years later, whenever Clint Eastwood was asked about the greatest gunfighters he had ever seen, real or fictional, he always mentioned that day. Dean Martin, he would say simply, 0.20 seconds, smooth as silk. Because on that quiet afternoon in Hollywood, everyone learned something surprising. Dean Martin wasn't just playing a gunfighter. For a brief moment on a movie set, he proved he could have been one.